Unit 1B, Lesson 5, Algebraic Proofs. Getting our first look at proofs, we're going to use the same basic algebraic process we've been using solving basic linear equations. It's just that when we go through the process, we're going to verify the property that allows us to go through each step in the process in solving some linear equation. First thing we need to do is go through some of the properties that we use most often. These are called properties of equality. All of these are going to be pretty straightforward for you. When we're talking about properties of equality, normally we just shorthand write that POE instead of writing out property of equality each time. So the distributive property, we've gone through that in previous lessons quite a bit. Then we have addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. What the addition property of equality says is simply if we have an equation, as long as we add the same value to both sides of the equation, we're keeping it equal. We're keeping it balanced, okay? That's something that's given, that's true. As long as we're adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing the same value to both sides of the equation, we still have an equal statement. We're not changing that equation at all. We're just rewriting it in a different form. And then we also have simply simplification. If we're just working on one side of an equation, combining like terms, we just write simplification. Now to the first example. While solving the equation 4 times the quantity x plus 2 equal to 28, Becca wrote 4x plus 8 equals 28. Which property did she use? Okay, so now I'm going to pause the video, think about which property she used before I write it down. So I rewrote this just so it's a little easier to follow. All she did was distribute this 4 through to the x and to the 2. 4 times x gives us 4x, 4 times 2 gives us 8. So she used the distributive property of equality in that process. Next example, when solving the equation 4 times the quantity 3x squared plus 2 minus 9 equal to 8x squared plus 7, Emily wrote 4 times the quantity 3x squared plus 2 equal to 8x squared plus 16 as her first step. Which property justifies Emily's first step? Okay, just like the last problem, pause, think about what step was used, and then start the video again. Just like last time, I rewrote this so it's a little easier to see, because now we can see that all she did was add this 9 to the other side of the equation. She added 9 to the left side and to the right side of the equation. So this was the addition property of equality. As long as you add the same value to both sides of the equation, it keeps it equal. We're just rewriting it in a different form. Example 3, when solving for the value of x in the equation 4 times the quantity x minus 1 plus 3 equal to 18, Aaron wrote the following lines on the board. So we can see line 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Which property was used incorrectly when going from line 2 to 3? Again, pause the video, try to figure this out on your own, then start it back up again. So the property that is used incorrectly in this process between lines 2 and 3 is the distributive property of equality. So when we went from 4 times the quantity x minus 1, distribution says we would take 4 times x to get 4x, and then 4 times negative 1 to get minus 4. So this negative 1 here, or minus 1, should have been minus 4 if Aaron had used the property correctly. Now to the last example, we're going to change up what the instructions say a little bit. So we have the equation 5 times the quantity x minus 2 minus 2 times the quantity x minus 5 equal to 9. What I want you to do is go through and solve for x, and then for each step I want you to identify the property you would use to perform that step, whether it's distributive, addition, whether it's simplification. Identify the property off to the right for each step that you perform when solving the equation. So pause the video, go through that process, try it on your own, and then start the video up again. So here is the process I went through to solve for x. You could have slightly gone through a different process, maybe rearranged the steps a little differently, and that's okay as long as you got x equals 3 in the end. So the first thing I did was distribute actually 2 times to get rid of the parentheses. If you notice off to the right, the first thing I wrote down, the first step was given. When we start doing proofs, especially in geometry next year, the first step you start with, the information you're provided, you always write given for the justification for that step. That's what we know, that's what we start with. So the next step was the distributive property of equality. After that, on the left side of the equation, I combined like terms. I had a 5x minus 2x, which gets me 3x, negative 10 and positive 10 cancel each other out. So the left side, I'm just left with 3x, which is just simplification. I just simplified for that step. Then last step to get x by itself would be divide by 3 to get x equals 3, which utilizes the division property of equality. This lesson is pretty straightforward. Just make sure you understand those properties, go through the process of solving linear equations, and justify each step with one of those properties.